They believed the danger had passed. They believed the earth had finished speaking. On the morning of November 1st, 1755, Lisbon woke to clear skies and calm air. The city moved slowly into the day, unaware that it was standing on the edge of total destruction. Bells rang from churches across the hills. It was All Saints' Day, one of the most important religious holidays of the year. Thousands gathered indoors, lighting candles, filling stone cathedrals that had stood for centuries. Lisbon was not just a city, it was the heart of an empire. Ships arrived daily from Africa, South America, and Asia. Gold from Brazil passed through its ports. Spices, silk, and ideas flowed through its streets. Nearly 300,000 people lived there, making it one of the largest and wealthiest cities in Europe. Its palaces, libraries, and churches were symbols of power and permanence. To its people, Lisbon felt eternal. At approximately 9:40 in the morning, the ground moved. At first, it felt like a tremor, brief, uncertain. Then the shaking intensified. Stone walls cracked, floors split open, entire buildings collapsed in seconds. Massive churches, filled with worshippers, crumbled inward, trapping thousands beneath falling ceilings and pillars. Streets buckled and tore apart as if the city itself was breaking from within. The earthquake lasted only minutes, but the damage was immediate and overwhelming. People screamed. Dust filled the air. The sound of collapsing stone echoed across the hills. Survivors crawled from the ruins, injured, bleeding, disoriented. Entire neighborhoods were reduced to rubble before anyone could understand what was happening, and then the shaking stopped. Those who were still alive believed they had survived the worst. Instinct drove them away from the ruins and toward open spaces. Many fled downhill, toward the river and the harbor. The wide shoreline felt safer than the narrow streets and collapsing buildings behind them. They did not know they were walking toward the next disaster. As fires began to spread through the shattered city, something strange happened at the water's edge. The river and the sea began to withdraw. Water pulled back far beyond its normal boundary, exposing the seabed. Ships leaned at unnatural angles. Fish flopped helplessly on the wet ground. Crowds gathered in confusion, curiosity overpowering fear. No one understood that the silence was a warning. Minutes later, the ocean returned. A massive wall of water surged toward Lisbon with incredible force. The tsunami crashed into the harbor, smashing ships into buildings and dragging people into the flood. Waves rose higher than rooftops, sweeping debris, animals, and human bodies back into the already ruined city. Entire sections of the shoreline vanished beneath the water. Those who had survived the earthquake were given no chance to escape. And still the destruction was not finished. Broken candles, overturned oil lamps, and open flames ignited the ruins. Fires spread rapidly through wooden structures and narrow streets. With water supplies destroyed and infrastructure collapsed, there was no way to control the flames. The city burned uncontrollably for days. Smoke darkened the sky. Heat consumed everything left standing. The combined destruction of earthquake, tsunami, and fire erased Lisbon almost completely. By the end of the catastrophe, tens of thousands were dead. Some estimates suggest the number may have reached 100,000. Entire families vanished. Libraries containing irreplaceable knowledge were lost forever. Palaces, homes, and churches that had stood for generations were reduced to ash. Lisbon, once a symbol of power and order, became a silent field of ruins. But the impact of that morning extended far beyond Portugal. Across Europe, news of the disaster spread rapidly. Philosophers, scientists, and theologians struggled to understand what had happened. For many, the event shattered the belief that disasters were acts of divine punishment alone. Thinkers like Voltaire questioned faith, fate, and the idea of a just world. For the first time, earthquakes were studied scientifically rather than spiritually. Governments began to ask new questions. How should cities be built? How could structures survive violent shaking? Lisbon became the first city rebuilt using early forms of earthquake-resistant design. Wide streets replaced narrow alleys. Buildings were constructed with wooden frameworks designed to absorb shock. From total destruction came a new understanding of risk, yet no amount of rebuilding could erase what had happened. The Lisbon earthquake revealed a terrifying truth. Civilization, no matter how advanced or powerful, exists at the mercy of forces beneath the ground. Wealth offers no protection. Belief offers no shield. When the earth moves, everything built upon it is fragile. The city would rise again, but November 1st, 1755, would never be forgotten. When the fires finally burned out, Lisbon was no longer recognizable. Days after the catastrophe, survivors returned cautiously to what remained of the city. The air still smelled of smoke and ash. Ruins stretched as far as the eye could see. Streets had vanished beneath collapsed stone. Familiar landmarks were gone. In many places, the dead still lay where they had fallen, buried beneath debris, or carried by the water into places no one would ever find. There was no clear number of victims. Entire records had been destroyed. Whole neighborhoods had disappeared. Families searched desperately for names that would never be answered. For many, survival brought not relief, but shock. The world they had known was gone. Food was scarce. Clean water was almost impossible to find. Disease threatened to spread among the living, just as destruction had swept through the city days earlier. Fear lingered, not only of aftershocks, but of what this disaster meant for the future. Portugal's leaders faced an impossible task, rebuilding a capital that had been almost completely erased. What followed was unprecedented. Instead of abandoning the city, the government made a radical decision. Lisbon would be rebuilt, not as it was, but as something stronger. Engineers, architects, and planners were given authority never before granted. Streets were widened. Building heights were limited. New construction methods were tested, including wooden frameworks hidden inside stone walls, designed to flex rather than shatter during earthquakes. To test these designs, models were built and shaken by marching soldiers, simulating seismic movement. It was one of the earliest attempts in history to design for natural disaster. Lisbon became the first modern city rebuilt with earthquake resistance in mind. But the influence of the disaster reached far beyond architecture. Across Europe, the Lisbon earthquake shook the foundations of philosophy itself. Thinkers struggled to reconcile the scale of suffering with existing beliefs about order, morality, and divine justice. If a city filled with worshippers could be destroyed on a holy day, what did that say about fate? The disaster forced a new way of thinking. Scientists began collecting eyewitness accounts, mapping damage patterns, and comparing observations. These early investigations laid the groundwork for modern seismology. For the first time, earthquakes were treated as natural phenomena that could be studied, measured, and understood, not simply feared. The Lisbon earthquake marked a turning point in humanity's relationship with nature. It revealed that disasters were not random punishments, but part of a larger system beyond human control. This realization was unsettling. It stripped away the illusion of safety provided by tradition, power, and belief. Yet time passed. Lisbon rebuilt itself. Life returned. Markets reopened. Ships once again filled the harbor. To later generations, the catastrophe became history. A chapter in books, a date on a timeline. The memory faded, as memories often do. But the ground beneath Lisbon never forgot. The region remains seismically active. The same forces that tore the city apart in 1755 still exist today, silent and unseen. Modern Lisbon is larger, denser, and home to millions. Technology has advanced. Buildings are stronger. Warnings are faster. Yet the fundamental reality has not changed. Earthquakes do not announce themselves. Tsunamis do not wait. Fires do not negotiate. The Lisbon disaster was not remarkable because it was unique. It was remarkable because it revealed how fragile civilization truly is when multiple forces align. The earthquake alone would have been devastating. The tsunami alone would have been catastrophic. The fires alone would have destroyed much of the city. Together, they erased it. What happened in Lisbon could happen elsewhere. Different city, different century, same sequence. The lesson remains unchanged. Human progress creates the illusion of control. But beneath our cities, beneath our technology, beneath our confidence, the planet continues to move on its own terms. Lisbon learned this in one morning, not through war, not through invasion, but through the quiet release of energy beneath the earth. The city fell, not because it was weak, but because nothing built by humans is permanent. And when the ground decides to move, history can change in minutes.